The idea for this ridiculous role reversal experiment came after my wife spent an entire weekend binge-watching a feminist podcast. She burst into the garage where I was fixing our lawnmower, a task she'd been nagging me about for weeks, and announced we needed to recalibrate our relationship dynamics. I looked up from the disassembled carburetor, grease covering my hands after 3 hours of work. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I've been thinking about how unfair our division of labor is," she declared, standing there in her pristine yoga outfit while I was covered in oil and sweat. "I propose we switch roles completely for 7 days. I'll do everything you do, and you'll do everything I do." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was spending my Saturday fixing something that benefited our entire household, while she had been relaxing and getting enlightened by strangers on the internet. "Everything I do?" I asked, wiping my hands on a rag. "You mean my 60-hour work week managing a construction crew? The yard work, home repairs, car maintenance, bill payments, retirement planning?" She rolled her eyes. "You make it sound so dramatic." "Yes. All of it. And you'll handle my responsibilities. Cooking, some cleaning, organizing our social calendar." I almost laughed. For years I'd been shouldering the financial burden, working overtime to provide the lifestyle she enjoyed, while still handling most of the physically demanding household tasks. Meanwhile, she worked part-time at a boutique, spent liberally, and considered loading the dishwasher a major accomplishment. Instead of arguing, a different strategy formed in my mind. You know what? Let's do it. 7 full days of role reversals starting tomorrow. No complaints. No backing out. Her eyes widened. She clearly expected resistance. "Really? You're on board just like that?" "Absolutely," I replied, firmly. "But there's one condition. We commit to the full 7 days, no matter what. We need to truly experience each other's responsibilities to make this meaningful." She eagerly agreed, completely unaware of what she was signing up for. That night, prepared everything she would need to step into my world. My work schedule. Contact information for my crew foreman, upcoming project deadlines, and the maintenance issues around the house that needed addressing. Over dinner, I outlined my daily routine, the 5 a.m. wake-up to review. Project plans before arriving at the construction site by 6:30. The quarterly tax payment due that week. And the negotiation scheduled with a difficult supplier. Her confidence began to waver as I detailed the week ahead. The smug certainty from earlier was replaced with nervous glances at the calendar I'd prepared. "Don't worry," I assured her with a knowing smile. "I'm sure you'll handle it as easily as I do every day." That night we set our alarms, hers for 5 a.m. Mine for the luxurious 7 a.m. she usually enjoyed. I felt a strange sense of anticipation. For years, my contributions had been taken for granted. Now she'd get a first-hand education in what keeping our lives running actually required. Day 1 began with the harsh blare of the alarm. At 5 a.m., I was already wide awake. From years of early rising, and watched as she fumbled to silence her phone. Groaning into her pillow. "Rise and shine," I said, stretching leisurely. "Big day ahead for the new construction manager." She mumbled something unintelligible and stumbled to the bathroom. 20 minutes later, she emerged looking completely unprepared for a construction site. Designer jeans and a blouse that probably cost more than my work boots. "You might want to reconsider your outfit," I suggested, still lounging in bed. The concrete pour scheduled today isn't exactly fashion-friendly. After another 15 minutes of wardrobe changes and increasing panic, she finally left wearing some of my old work clothes, looking completely out of her element. I dozed for another hour, savoring the unusual morning quiet, and casually got up at her usual wake time. According to our agreement, that day I would handle her responsibilities. I started with the dishes from the previous night, then threw in a load of laundry and spent 30 minutes cleaning the kitchen and living room. By 9:30 a.m., I'd completed what she would normally consider a full day's work. With hours to spare, I organized the pantry, fixed the squeaky closet door, and replaced burned-out light fixtures in the hallway. Around noon, my phone rang. It was my assistant foreman. "Hey, boss. Is your wife serious about this role swap thing?" She's been sitting in your truck for the past hour making calls after she tried to explain the foundation inspection to the city inspector. I suppressed a laugh. Tell her to put you in charge of the inspection and just observe. Shortly after she called, her voice was tight with stress. These people don't listen to anything I say. The inspector asked technical questions I couldn't answer. And your crew keeps checking with each other instead of following my instructions. Welcome to my Monday, I replied calmly. Remember when you told me anyone could do what I do with minimal training? Maybe reconsider that position. This isn't fair, she snapped. You've been doing this job for years. And yesterday you claimed it wasn't particularly difficult or valuable. Are you calling to quit our experiment on day one? I interrupted. There was a pause. Her pride wouldn't let her concede quickly. No, she finally answered. I made a commitment. Good D. Concrete delivery is at 2 p.m. Make sure the forms are properly braced. Before they pour, I hung up and turned my attention to preparing an elaborate dinner, far more complex than anything she typically made. I even had time to bake fresh bread, something she'd always claimed was too time-consuming. At 7 p.m., I heard her car in the driveway. She trudged through the door looking utterly defeated, clothes stained with concrete, hair disheveled, and an expression of exhaustion I recognized all too well. It was the look I wore most nights, though she rarely noticed. Dinner's ready, I announced cheerfully. I've prepared coq au vin with fresh sourdough and a side salad. She stared at the immaculate kitchen, then at me, then at the gourmet meal laid out on our usually cluttered dining table. How did you have time for all this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Oh, I finished your daily tasks by mid-morning, I replied casually. So I had plenty of time to deep clean the house, fix a few things, organize our tax documents, and still make dinner from scratch. How was your day? Instead of answering, she collapsed into a chair and reached for the wine bottle. After a long drink straight from the glass, she finally spoke. One of my clients threatened to pull their contract because I couldn't answer basic questions about the project timeline. Your foreman had to step in and save the deal. Then I had to approve payroll, having no idea who worked what hours. The concrete crew practically ignored me, and some supplier called about an order I knew nothing about. I nodded sympathetically while serving her a plate. Sounds like a typical Monday for me, I said. Except I usually come home to a sandwich and complaints about how you didn't have time to clean. She looked around at the spotless house, the gourmet meal, and then down at her filthy clothes. Something shifted in her expression, the first crack in her certainty. Tomorrow will be better, I assured her, though we both knew it wouldn't be. In fact, I had deliberately scheduled one of my most challenging days for her second attempt. Day 1 had been a reality check. Day 2 would be the breaking point. Day 2 began, much like the first. With her alarm blaring at 5 a.m., the soreness from yesterday's physical work had settled into her muscles overnight. I watched as she winced while pulling herself out of bed, her movements stiff and labored. There's ibuprofen in my drawer, I offered, not unkindly. You'll need it. The foundation inspection is today. She swallowed the pills dry, a grim determination replacing yesterday's naivety. As she dressed in more appropriate work where this time, I noticed her checking her phone with increasing alarm. Everything okay? I asked. Why are there 27 new emails from clients and suppliers since midnight? And why is someone named Big Mike calling at 5:15 a.m.? Ah, that would be my excavation contractor. He starts early. You should call him back. He's probably having issues with the permit for today's dig. The color drained from her face as she dialed the number and stepped into the hallway. I could hear her struggling to sound authoritative while having no idea what Big Mike was talking about. After a 5-minute conversation that aged her another 5 years, she returned to the bedroom. There's some problem with an excavator permit and something about shoring requirements. He kept asking for decisions I don't know how to make. Did you tell him to proceed with the secondary plan we discussed last week? I asked innocently. What secondary plan? She nearly shouted, running her hands through her hair. Nobody told me about any secondary plan. It's in the project notes, I said. The folder I gave you before the experiment started, Her eyes widened with panic. There were over 100 pages in that folder. Yes, I nodded. That's this week's projects. I read and memorize those details every weekend, so I'm prepared for exactly these situations. She looked at me with new eyes. Not just frustration, but the dawning realization that my job wasn't just showing up and giving orders. It was constant preparation, anticipation, and knowledge that couldn't be faked. After she left, rushing out without breakfast to handle Big Mike's crisis, I once again took my time getting started with her responsibilities. By 10 a.m., I had cleaned the entire house, prepared a slow cooker meal for dinner, and reorganized the linen closet she'd been complaining about for months. With plenty of time to spare, I repainted the guest bathroom, fixed a leaky faucet, and organized scattered family photos into albums. Around 1 p.m., my phone erupted with her panicked voice. There's an emergency at the Richardson project. The inspector failed the foundation because of an issue with the rebar spacing. The concrete trucks are already here. The crew is standing around doing nothing, and everyone's looking at me for answers. I could hear the chaos in the background, men shouting, engines running, her voice nearly breaking with stress. Put my foreman on the phone, I said calmly, after a brief conversation. I learned the inspector had found legitimate issues, something that happened occasionally even to me. The difference was that I knew how to handle these situations. Let me talk to her again, I requested. When she came back on the line, I could tell she was on the verge of tears. This is a $10,000 mistake. The client is furious. Your crew is staring at me like I'm useless. I can't do this. Are you saying you want to end our experiment? I asked evenly. Yes, she practically shouted. This is impossible. I made a mistake thinking I could step into your shoes. Ain't you win? Okay, now please help me fix this mess. I paused deliberately, letting the moment sink in. Our agreement was 7 days, no matter what. That was your condition, remember? Backing out on day 2 would mean admitting you can't handle what I manage every day without complaint. The line went silent except for her shaky breathing. Fine, she said finally. I'll do it. But help me salvage this situation. 20 minutes and one technical discussion later, I had guided them through a solution that would satisfy code requirements without scrapping the entire pour. It would cost extra and delay the project, but it wouldn't be catastrophic. When she called that evening to say she was finally leaving the site, her voice was hollow with exhaustion. I'll be home in 30 minutes. Please tell me dinner doesn't require any effort on my part. Everything's taken care of, I assured her. Since I had extra time, I also installed those floating shelves in the office that she'd wanted for the past year, updated our insurance policies to save us $200 monthly, and scheduled that chimney cleaning she'd been putting off. When she finally walked through the door to ours. Later, traffic had delayed her even. Further, she looked like a different person than the confident. A woman who had proposed this experiment 48 hours ago. She dropped her hard hat on the floor and collapsed onto the couch. Can't do 5 more days of this, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, I'm begging you. Let's end this now. I sat beside her, maintaining my composure. Day 2 was always going to be the hardest, I said calmly. But ending now means you'll never fully understand what I handle for our family. She looked at me with genuine tears in her eyes. I understand enough. Your job is impossible. I don't know how you do it day after day. I smiled slightly. It's not impossible. It's just demanding. And I do it because that's what it takes to build the life we have. After a long silence, I offered a compromise. You don't have to go back to the construction site, but there are other aspects of my responsibilities you haven't experienced yet. We continue the experiment, but with modifications. Relief washed over her face, followed by suspicion. What kind of modifications? Tomorrow, you'll handle our finances, home maintenance calls, and the meeting with our insurance agent. I'll continue with the household duties, she hesitated, clearly torn between pride and the desperate need to escape another day like today. Fine, she agreed. But no more construction site. She dragged herself to the shower. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The construction site had been the most visible part of my responsibilities. It wasn't even half of what I managed. The next phase of her education was about to begin. Day 3 dawned with a change in atmosphere. No construction site for her meant she still faced a 5 a.m. alarm, which I made sure her day wouldn't be any less enlightening. When she finally emerged at 7:30, looking marginally more rested but still wary, I had coffee waiting and a leather portfolio on the kitchen table. "What's that?" she asked, eyeing the portfolio suspiciously. "Your agenda for today," I replied, sliding it toward her. "Quarterly financial review. 3 maintenance appointments that need supervision. A meeting with our insurance agent about policy renewals." She opened the portfolio and her eyes widened at the stack of spreadsheets, statements, and schedules inside. "You'll need to reconcile our accounts," I began. "I flagged some unusual charges on your credit card that need verification. Then transfer funds to cover the property tax payment due tomorrow. It's $4,700, by the way. After that, call about the water heater warranty. It's making that knocking sound again."
Oh, Ray.
Her coffee remained untouched as she flipped through the papers with increasing alarm. "Why are there so many investment statements? And what's this about a home equity line decision?" "That's our retirement planning section," I explained. "We need to decide whether to increase contributions or use that money to pay down the line. The interest rate differential makes it complicated. I've been analyzing it for weeks." She looked up at me with genuine confusion. "You've been doing all this when nights, weekends, during lunch breaks?" I shrugged. "Someone has to manage our financial future." For the first time in the week, genuine respect appeared in her expression. This wasn't physical labor she could dismiss. This was complex, consequential decision-making that directly impacted our lives and future. There was one more item. I pulled a separate folder from my bag. "These are the unpaid medical bills from your mother's hospital stay last year. The insurance denied some claims, but I've been disputing them. There's an appeal hearing by phone at 2 p.m. Her hand flew to her mouth. "My mother's bills. I thought those were resolved months ago. We'd have been if we'd paid the $14,000 out of pocket. Instead, I've been fighting the insurance company and making minimum payments to keep it from collections." A heavy silence fell between us. For perhaps the first time, she saw the invisible mental load I carried. Not just physical tasks or work responsibilities, but the constant grinding weight of financial management, planning, and problem-solving that kept our lives from unraveling. "I need to make breakfast," I said, standing up. "The plumber will be here at 9 o'clock to look at the upstairs shower leak. Make sure he gives you an actual quote, not an estimate. Last time he tried to add $300 in unexpected complications." When the plumber arrived, she struggled to understand the technical issue with our water pressure regulator. "Just authorize the work," I heard her say desperately. "Whatever needs to be done." I asked later, "Did he give you a firm quote?" "No," she admitted. "He said he couldn't know the full extent until he opened the wall. That's how they leave room for price gouging. I never authorize work without a maximum price in writing." She looked deflated. A $1,200 mistake potentially, but a learning experience. The afternoon offered no relief. The insurance appeal call required detailed knowledge of medical billing codes and policy. Exclusions, information I'd spent hours researching. By 4 p.m., when our insurance agent arrived for the policy review, she was completely overwhelmed. She nodded blankly while he discussed liability limits and premium options. When he asked for decisions about coverage changes, she looked at me helplessly. "I usually handle this," I explained to the agent. "She's learning the ropes." After he left, she pushed the portfolio away like it was radioactive. "How do you keep track of all this?" she asked quietly. "It's endless. Every decision feels like it could be a costly mistake." "That's the reality of running a household," I replied. "It's not just about who does the dishes or takes out the trash. It's about who carries the mental burden of keeping everything from falling apart." For the first time, she seemed to understand. I handle all of this, plus a more than full-time job, and still manage to fix things around the house. Yet somehow I was still made to feel like I wasn't doing enough before the day ended. I retrieved an estimate for replacing the HVAC system. It was $11,300. We needed to decide whether to repair the existing unit for $2,100 or invest in the replacement. She stared at the numbers, the magnitude of these decisions finally sinking in. "How do you do this every day?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "How do you carry all this weight and never break?" I looked at her steadily. "That's what I committed to doing. That's what building a life requires. Not complaints, not keeping score, just showing up and doing what needs to be done." For the first time in our experiment, I saw genuine regret in her eyes. Not just exhaustion, but a dawning recognition of how profoundly she'd undervalued my contribution. Day 4 would be about social obligations, another arena where her perception of our roles had been wildly misguided. By day 5, the physical and mental fatigue was clearly taking its toll. The confident woman who had proposed this exercise was nowhere to be found. In her place was someone who moved cautiously through our home, eyeing my task lists with growing apprehension. That morning I casually mentioned, "We're hosting dinner for my colleagues tonight." Her fork clattered against her plate. "What? Tonight? You never mentioned this?" "Actually, it's been on our shared calendar for 3 weeks. 6 people arriving at 7. As per our experiment, you'll be handling all the aspects I normally manage during these gatherings." "Which parts are those?" she asked cautiously. "Well," I said, "you handle the food and drinks while I manage the networking. Conversation dynamics, professional relationships, and ensure everyone's career interests are advanced through strategic interactions. Tonight we swap. I'll make the food. You'll handle the professional dynamics." The color drained from her face. "That's not fair. I don't understand your work relationships." "Precisely my point," I replied. "All this time you've considered social hosting merely preparing food and cleaning up. You've never acknowledged the complex professional maneuvering I handled during these dinners." I slid a folder across the table. "Here's the background on each guest, their current projects, career aspirations, and potential conflicts. Notes in red indicate sensitive topics to avoid." She flipped through pages of detailed information, eyes widening. "You prepare this much background for a dinner party?" "These aren't just social gatherings," I said. "They're career management opportunities. My project funding for next quarter depends largely on the impression we make tonight." By afternoon, she paced the house, frantically reviewing my notes and practicing conversation starters. At exactly 7, our first guests arrived. I greeted them, took coats, and guided them to the living room while she waited stiffly, clutching a glass of wine. Over the next 3 hours, I watched her attempt to navigate the complex interpersonal dynamics of my professional circle, redirecting conversations, highlighting accomplishments, mediating conflicts. The breaking point came during dessert when the regional director casually mentioned a controversial policy change that divided the leadership. All eyes turned to her, waiting for the diplomatic response I would normally provide, the one that acknowledges all perspectives, while subtly reinforcing the position that benefits our team. Instead, she froze. "I'm not sure I have strong feelings about that particular issue." She stammered a response that satisfied no one and potentially alienated everyone. I saw the regional director's eyebrows rise slightly, a tiny gesture I recognized as disappointment. In that moment, thousands of dollars in potential project funding likely evaporated. When our guests finally departed around 10:30 p.m., she collapsed onto the couch, emotionally exhausted in a way that physical labor could never induce. "How many of these dinners do you host per month?" she asked quietly. 2 or 3, I replied, plus lunch meetings, industry events, and quarterly office parties where similar dynamics are at play. She shook her head slowly. "I always thought you were just socializing, having fun with colleagues while I did all the work behind the scenes. The food and drinks are the easy part, managing personalities, protecting career interests, and advancing professional relationships. That's the exhausting work," I said. "And I do it while remembering everyone's children's names, their spouses' occupations, and which topics might unintentionally cause offense." She looked at me with new humility. "I've been unfair to you for years." I neither agreed nor disagreed, letting the moment speak for itself. By day 5, the transformation in her perspective was remarkable, from righteous indignation to genuine remorse. That evening, as I finished cleaning the kitchen, She sat on the couch, staring thoughtfully into space. When I sat beside her, she turned to me with unexpected tears in her eyes. "How do we fix this?" she asked simply. "We're not done with our experiment," I reminded her. "2 more days." She nodded, accepting this without protest, a stark contrast to her desperate pleas days earlier. "What's tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," I said, "we discuss the future. Both our future together and my career trajectory that you've never fully understood." Day 6 arrived with a different atmosphere. The combative energy from the beginning had dissipated, replaced by reflection. I found her already awake at 6 a.m., sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the financial documents from earlier in the week. "You're up early," I observed, pouring my own coffee. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "I keep thinking about everything I've learned this week." Instead of my usual routine, I sat across from her. "Today's focus is different," I explained. "It's about understanding the long-term trajectory. I've been building the one you've often criticized as prioritizing work over family." She winced at hearing her own words reflected back, but nodded for me to continue. I opened the presentation I'd prepared months ago, but never shared. "This is the 5-year career plan I've been developing," I said. I walked her through the slides, detailed projections of increasing responsibilities, compensation structures, and strategic moves. The culmination was a leadership role that would nearly double our household income within 4 years. "Why haven't I seen this before?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "I tried," I replied. "Both times you said work conversations were stressful and changed the subject." She looked embarrassed. "I had no idea you were planning at this level. That's the point," I said. "You saw the hours I put in, but not their purpose. I've been actively architecting our future." Around noon, I suggested a drive. I parked in front of an impressive home with a discreet for sale sign. "What are we doing here?" she asked as we walked up the driveway. "This is the house I've been working toward," I said. 3 more years of executing my plan, and we can afford it comfortably." Her expression shifted as she peered through the windows at soaring ceilings. A gourmet kitchen and a backyard pool, features she'd mentioned wanting in our someday home. "This isn't just a fantasy," I explained. "This is mathematically achievable if I continue on my current trajectory." As we drove home in thoughtful silence, I could see her recalibrating her entire understanding of our marriage and my role. What she'd perceived as workaholism was actually purposeful, strategic advancement toward shared dreams. Back home, I prepared a simple lunch while she remained unusually quiet. When we finally sat down, she looked at me with new eyes. "I've been wrong about almost everything, haven't I?" she asked softly. "You've been seeing only the surface level of our lives, visible tasks and immediate friction points," I said. "You missed the architecture beneath it all." "Why didn't you make me understand this sooner?" she asked. "I tried," I replied honestly, "but you weren't ready to listen. You had a narrative about our contributions and roles that you weren't willing to question." She nodded slowly, accepting the difficult truth. "So what happens now, after tomorrow, when our experiment ends?" she asked. This was the conversation I'd been strategically building toward all week. Things couldn't go back to how they were. This experiment wasn't just about proving a point. It was about creating a foundation for change. "First," I said firmly, acknowledgement, "I need explicit recognition of the value I bring to our partnership, not just financially, but in all the ways you've experienced this week." She nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely." "Second, participation. Not equality in every task, but awareness, and appreciation of what each responsibility entails. No more dismissing my work or financial decisions as less important than social calendars or household aesthetics." "Again," she agreed readily. "Finally, partnership. Real partnership. That means when I present career opportunities or financial strategies, you engage meaningfully. It means understanding that when I'm working late, I'm not avoiding family time. I'm investing in our future." She reached across the table and took my hand, the first genuinely warm gesture she'd initiated all week. "I understand now," she said, voice carrying a new respect. "I want that partnership too. I just didn't realize how much I wasn't seeing." That evening, instead of separate activities, we reviewed the household budget, investment accounts, career projections together. It was the first truly collaborative financial discussion of our marriage. She asked insightful questions and offered perspectives I hadn't considered, proving she could be the partner I needed when properly engaged. As we prepared for bed on the eve of our final experiment day, there was a palpable shift in the dynamic between us. The power balance had fundamentally reset, not through argument or ultimatum, but through experiential understanding. "One more day," she remarked as we turned out the lights. "The most important one," I replied. Tomorrow wasn't about roles or tasks. It was about establishing our new normal. In the darkness, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. This experiment, which she had initiated to prove a point about gender roles and household labor, had become the catalyst for the most profound recalibration of our relationship since our wedding day. Day 7 wouldn't just conclude our experiment, it would begin our future. A future where my contributions were finally valued, my perspective respected, and my leadership acknowledged not through demands, but by creating a situation where she could discover their necessity for herself. Sometimes the most effective way to change a relationship isn't through conflict, but through revelation. Over the past 6 days, those revelations had been transformative if you've made it this far. How about subscribing to the channel?